Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Give a second for more people to join. My name's Laura. I'm on the sales team here at Naturalist Journeys. And we are excited to have Bryan Calk, who recently guided our Oaxaca tour. So he's going to give a presentation. We are also joined by Robert Petty, who will be guiding the April tour, along with Eric Martinez, who is on our local guide and local operator for Oaxaca. So very happy to have them both as well. We'll maybe give another minute and then Bryan can get started. If people have questions along the way, there's a little chat button at the bottom. So if you just add questions as they come up throughout the presentation, we'll go through and answer questions at the end. So you can just pop them in there as they pop into your head. Bryan, whenever you want to take it away, I think we're probably good to go.
So this evening, I was asked to present about my trip recently to Oaxaca. Um, and this was my first time down really birding in Mexico at all. But Oaxaca had been one of my most wanted destinations in the world to get to go. And you'll see why here in a little bit. When I asked the office, every year we talk about what trips you'd like to do, which ones you enjoyed, which ones you might want to do in the future. This was one that I put out there as like, you know, maybe if I was on my best behavior, they might give it to me. So I was really glad for the opportunity. For me, this was a trip of a lifetime. Um, but anyway, getting into it, Oaxaca, at least where we explored, um, I think can be kind of summed up in three different ecological words, and that's goes right along with the name of this tour. It's the valleys, the mountains, and the coast. And we spend a lot of time in each of those places on this journey. Um, but this isn't really just a birding trip. It's exploring those elevations, exploring the culture, seeing endemics of all kinds, and some really good food. It's all layered together. We move from arid scrub around 5,000 feet up to pine oak forests, and then we descend down the mountains to the coast on the Pacific. So the scenery is spectacular, as you can imagine. And I would say this tour is for people who want Mexico in depth in a well-rounded way. It's for serious birders. There's lots of endemics, lots of really spectacular birds to see along the way. It's for photographers. It's for naturalists. We had people in our group who were constantly distracted by the butterflies, me included, and the plants and everything else. This region is just so biologically and culturally rich, which made it, like I said, one of my most wanted places to get to go. So where Oaxaca is, it's there in southern Mexico on the Pacific side. Um, and on the eastern side of the state, it forms part of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And like I mentioned, Oaxaca is highly mountainous. It's one of the most mountainous states in Mexico. Um, and it's a network of peaks and valleys, and that rugged terrain isolates plants, it isolates animals, and it even over time has isolated human communities. Um, so Oaxaca, one thing that I was surprised to learn is there's, I don't know how many, 15, 18 different languages that are spoken across the state. It's just such a rich place and diverse place culturally. Um, and it's kind of, if you think about it, it's like um, it's through the same mechanisms that create biodiversity. It's people are isolated, these populations of wildlife are isolated, and that drives evolution, it drives diversity, and that's what makes it so special, and that's what makes it so rich in endemics. Um, it's really just like nowhere else. Um, and part of that is also contributed by the two major mountain ranges that converge here, the Sierra Madre del Sur and the Sierra Madre de Oaxaca to the north. And we spend time exploring both of those mountain ranges on this trip. Um, so it's just a really rich, amazing place. And our route kind of roughly follows these two arrows. It's a sort of a transect heading south from Oaxaca City. This is our map from our eBird trip report. So you can see where we spent a lot of time around Oaxaca City and the foothills and mountains there. And then we moved down into the Sierra Madre del Sur for a little bit and then made it down to the coast. Um, so exploring a lot of different habitats in between there, um, and a lot of different cultural stops along the way that keep it really rich. And it's just a continuous story along the whole route. It's not just random stops. It tells a really impressive story. Oh, and one of the things that I wanted to point out while I had this slide up, where you can see sort of the topography a little bit, is one thing that we try to fit in on this itinerary is a pelagic trip, and that's going out in a boat and looking for birds offshore. And if you look at the slope off the shelf in the water, you can see how pretty quickly it just slopes right off into deeper water. And that's just another thing that makes this place really special. It's that subduction zone of the Cocos Plate. It's kind of similar to what you see on the coast of California, where you have that shelf pretty close to shore. So trying to incorporate that pelagic trip is just like the cherry on top. So getting into the tour itself, if at all possible, I would recommend that you get there a day or two early to explore the city on your own. We do incorporate time to do that in the tour, and I was just wishing that I had had more time myself to get to walk around and explore the city, the art galleries, the artisan markets, museums, street life, food, architecture. It's all right there. It's pretty walkable too from where we stay in the city. It's all really accessible. And even if you're relatively new to international travel, I felt very comfortable. I thought everything was, very easy to navigate. And getting there a little early can help you just acclimatize to the space and the culture. And if you're coming from sea level, maybe the elevation a little bit too, that could help. But anyway, I wish I had had more time. Oaxaca is considered one of the world's culinary capitals. It's famous for its moles, mezcal, chocolate, coffee, and it's really deeply rooted in tradition. We visit some internationally recognized restaurants. I mean, one of the spots that we get to go to, it has Michelin star recognition, which I thought was awesome. And the food here I think it's really impressive or it's fun to think about, at least how it's directly tied to the geography and the history of the area. This was one of the first places we see corn being domesticated, the use of the native agave, cacao, chilies, all that's tied directly to the landscape, which is pretty awesome. The colors are striking. It's Latin America. They know how to make things beautiful. So I really recommend, like I said, spending more time. I wish I could have taken more photos, and just spending time and exploring the city. You never know what you might come across. Hopefully that video played a little bit. But this was I think the Cathedral of Santo Domingo, and it's one of the architectural icons in the city. And we actually didn't get to go in and explore when I visited because there was a wedding actively going on and parties and dancing. And it was just a cool reminder that these aren't just like historical sites that you're visiting. These are living, breathing places that are still culturally relevant to people. And to just see them being lived in and being used was awesome. We also get to go to some significant sites like the Tule tree, which is one of the widest, or I think the widest tree trunk of any tree in the world. It's got its own special irrigation system. It's well cared for, and it's just amazing. I think its age is estimated between 1,500 and 2,000 years old. So getting to see cool spots like that. So anyway, there's just so much to see. Recommend you spending a little extra time. But getting to some of the birding and exploring the habitats around the area. So I kind of organized this presentation loosely by the itinerary. So starting around Oaxaca City, we bird in the foothill habitats, exploring some of the desert scrub there, some of the smaller reservoirs in the area. And these mid-elevation scrubby oak areas are really fantastic for Mexican endemic species and habitat specialists finding little mixed flocks. And this is where those elevation gradients you really see how those come into play with the different species and different distributions. And birding in this habitat for me was a lot of fun. It's really reminiscent of some of the habitats I grew up birding in South Texas. But so to kind of walk through that and then see like slaty vireos and stuff it's like I don't know, it's a really cool experience. We find riparian habitats just kind of like we would in drier parts of the US to bring in more diversity, concentrate the birds. So we kind of concentrate on those areas. And just looking at the plants in the area was a lot of fun. There's a huge diversity of cacti and some really impressive ones, massive columnar cacti. I just couldn't quite get over the size of some of these things. And then we go up into the mountains around like La Cumbre and those areas, and we're in pine oak forest, about 9,000 feet. Temperatures drop, it gets moist. We put our coats on, we put our hats on, we put our scarves on. So to go from the desert right up into this is pretty awesome. And that's where we look for things like this guy, red warbler. I mean, you can see all the moisture dripping off the pine needles there. It tells you how misty and that it is up there in the sort of cloud forest. And morning temperatures can be really chilly. Layers are essential, like I said. There, and the diversity of plants, like I mentioned, it's really phenomenal. It's not just in the desert, it's up here too, with the epiphytes, the mosses, the ferns. I could have just spent all day taking pictures of plants. I mean, we found wild dahlias, which I thought was awesome as someone who loves to grow dahlias. There's just so many unexpected surprises along the way. And we saw some pretty impressive agaves, and they're not just, the plants that you think of for mezcal. They're keystone plants for pollinators, for bats, for moths, for all sorts of things. And they're, depend on those seasonal rhythms. They take a long time to mature. So it was cool to get to see some of these areas where they're, protected. And then along the way, we also got to stop for some cultural experiences. We went to a local weaving co-op where they were hand dyeing natural fibers with natural dyes from plants, from insects like cochineal, which is what's growing on those prickly pear pads in the back. It's a scale insect that they dry and grind up to make a variety of colors depending on the acidity of the way they soak it. We got to see them actually weaving the rugs, which was amazing. We got to try carding the wool ourselves. So it's always fun to get to interact with things like this and get to try it ourselves and talk with the people and ask questions. And then, of course, we got to do some shopping next door with just every color and size and pattern and anything you could imagine. It's just really amazing work that's still being done in traditional ways. And on a moving day, we got to visit San Martin, which is famous for the alebrijes, which are those little carved wooden figurines. Oh, here you go. Of animals with these amazing intricate patterns. And in Oaxaca, there's the tradition of tonas and nahuales, which are your animal protectors and spirit guides. And there's a vendor there where they teach you about this, and you can purchase the little the artwork that's just phenomenal. Um, and it's a tradition that has more modern roots, but it draws heavily on the Zapotec um, animal symbolism. So it's a pretty impressive example of how culture is continuing to grow and continuing to build on itself. And it's in a way kind of it's an example of biodiversity in the area influencing art. Anyway, I just was fascinated by the whole thing. And then we got to visit some beautiful archaeological sites. This was another thing that surprised me. This is one of the views from Monte Alban. This is the view looking the other direction of the archaeological site. Monte Alban was founded around 500 BC. And just to walk the grounds and learn about its history is always rewarding to get to go to those kinds of sites, and especially to see how expansive this site was totally unexpected to me. I'd been to Maya sites in Belize before, but yeah, I was not expecting this. This was a really awesome day. And to just, walk with Eric, who's, walking encyclopedia of all of this stuff, is such a treat. We got to go also to Yagul, which is another archaeological site, which is a little bit smaller, but I would say it's like equally as atmospheric in a way. Had some really great birding in the area. And yeah, here's another view of some of those sites and walking between the ruined sites and the beautiful grounds that are maintained and some of the carvings that you see along the way. So as you're doing all of this wonderful stuff, as you're exploring these habitats and visiting these sites and learning all of these things, you're also seeing birds as we go. So this is one of my favorite neotropical species, elegant euphonias, that we saw on like the first stop of the first day. It's like this is how this is going to go. Okay. And then you see endemics like gray-breasted woodpeckers, bridled sparrows, and I mean, they're endemic, but they're also stunning. Like it just doesn't get better. White-throated towhees out in the agave fields with Boucard's wrens. And then you go up, those are, sort of foothill kind of species. And you get up into the mountains, back into that cloud forest habitat. And we're listening for these gray barred wrens that move around in flocks. And they're, moving through the epiphytes, picking for bugs in the mosses. And they're awesome. We enjoy looking at them. And they signal to us that we should look for dwarf jays that are living in the same habitat. They're a pretty secretive, quieter bird, harder to spot, less common. And if we're really lucky, you find white-throated jays in those same areas. I felt really lucky to get to see this one. Eric was telling us that this is one of the more difficult species to get to see in the state, but it's one that you definitely hope for. And in some of the riparian areas and around the area, we got to see Mexican mud turtle. And so it's not, like I mentioned, there's just so much to look at besides the birds, besides everything else. You're always seeing something amazing. I love my herps, so liked seeing the turtles, beautiful bugs that were on some of the leaves. I believe this is emerald swift. or emerald spiny lizard at one of the archaeological sites. As we were sitting having lunch, um, we had these princely tiger moths feeding on some of the flowers off the deck, which were just spectacular. Like I said, the butterflies were just so distracting everywhere we went. So many beautiful species, and I could have spent a whole day just photographing them. I think this one is a bumblebee metal mark or bee metal mark or something like that. And then so that's all kind of around Oaxaca City. And then you move down into the Sierra Madre del Sur and you stay at San Jose del Pacifico. Um, and this was one of my favorite spots that we stayed. You're up in the mountains, you're on steep slopes, stunning vistas, beautiful gardens. I think our lodging is about 8,000 feet or so. So just to be up in those cooler temperatures with the mosses and the bromeliads, with the totally different mix of birds and great birding on the grounds, with mixed flocks and everything moving through. I really enjoyed it. This was my cabin here in this picture, and this was my neighbor across the way sitting out enjoying some birds from her balcony. And you'll see there's a chimney on that cabin, and it gets cool enough that none of the cabins here have AC. You don't need it, but they all have a wood stove, or I mean a wood fireplace. So if you want to stay warm, they'll come build a fire for you in your cabin to keep you warm at night, which I thought was awesome. And walking around the habitats there, I really tried to capture how large some of these oak trees were. I just was blown away by, again, just some of the plants were just incredible. And some of the views that you see along the way are just spectacular. Like an example of one of the spots where we would have lunch. And birding in these spots, it was kind of cool to see some of the species that we're familiar with, maybe from back home, if you're from the US, like these Stellar's jays that were around that same place that I was mentioning with the cabins. But they're different, slightly different subspecies, bigger crest. They got a little bit different look to them. If you've been birding in Arizona, you've seen maybe yellow-eyed juncos. It's cool to see them around. And then migrants like Townsend's warblers, really common. And if you're from Arizona, you may have chased a tufted flycatcher or two, a rare bird showing up there. It was cool to see them where they're supposed to be. And then, of course, you look for our top targets, like the Bumblebee Hummingbird, the second smallest bird in the world. And to see this male like fully doing his song and display and hovering for the female, just awesome. And to watch them feed from I think this is Devil's Hand tree. And just to see, how the hummingbirds and the plants have evolved together. Just there are so many natural history stories along the way. And then just incredible birds again. Chestnut-sided shrike vireo, a spectacular endemic. Brownback solitaire. Oh my gosh, I almost cried when I first heard one of these singing. The first time we got to hear one of these sing on the trip, that was one of my big bucket list things. And then this, that was on one of our early days up in the mountains. We're hiking up the road. It's cold and drizzly. And then a few days later, this guy's eating berries like 10 feet off my back porch. So I just was in heaven. Golden browed warblers, collared towhees on the grounds, just, while we're hanging out. And we go to special spots to look for other endemics like this blue-capped hummingbird. This was a kind of a special surprise. We had lunch at that place I showed the picture of earlier with the big beautiful vista, and just a short walk on the property, and we found this guy on territory, and it was like slightly raining and the big vista behind with the mountains. It was just so many magical moments. Russet crown motmot posing for us. This one made us work a little bit. This is northern emerald toucanet, and this is the Wagler's subspecies, one that might be a potential split in the future to its own species status. Pale-billed woodpecker was a big highlight for a lot of people on our trip. And then again, besides the birds, my favorite butterfly, malachite. We got to see a few of those, and they're just stunning. We have white morphos that were flying up and down the road all the time. All sorts of heliconians, metal marks, skippers, tons and tons of butterflies. If you're into butterflies, this is a really, really great trip. And then moving down from the mountains and the foothills there, we make it to the coast, to Huatulco, where we stay for the last few nights of the trip. And this is the beach that is just walking distance from the hotel where we stay. Just stunning, stunning beaches. Great food, nice people. Again, felt very comfortable, easy to walk around and explore on your own during free time if you wanted to. It's warmer, more humid. Of course, we're at sea level now. And this is one of the beaches nearby. So it's, again, kind of gives that little bit of West Coast California sort of feel with these steep bluffs and cliffs meeting the ocean there. And then again with these impressive columnar cacti, just the scenery just didn't quit the whole time. It was just dramatic and beautiful. And then walking on the beach there, we got to see marked areas where sea turtles had been nesting, which I thought was pretty cool to see that they were marked and protected. And just walking around the city itself, I think it's beautiful. I think the architecture is pretty, and it's just a relaxed atmosphere, very easygoing. While we're visiting that area, we do venture back up into the foothills a little bit to explore some other areas for birds, as well as visiting a coffee finca where they're growing and processing their own coffee. These shade grown systems support higher biodiversity, so it's nice to support that. And we got to see the whole process firsthand, sample some delicious coffee, and the folks here also served us a delicious meal that I think I had thirds of, and some of the best flan I'd ever had. Just so wonderful. And it's really impressive going to all these places with Eric, because he knows everybody. And, he has all these wonderful relationships with local people. So I feel like, get to go to some pretty special spots thanks to him. And again, along the way, just spectacular scenery. As we were driving by, we kind of demanded a stop at this waterfall just for the scenery shots. Totally worth it. It kind of has that feeling of like Costa Rica or something if you've been there, with just the waterfalls coming off the mountain, just stunning. And again, with the birds, we visit a lot of hotspots in the area. I won't go into all the detail of every single spot that we do, but one of the spots that we visited around Huatulco was Las Ninfas, which is an ecological preserve there. And it was one of my favorite spots. The owner of the property came with us on our bird walk and was pointing out birds to us. And being from Texas, I have a connection with private lands conservation and the importance of that, and people sharing what they have with the community. And so to see that in action wherever I go is always a treat. So to get to meet them and bird their property with them, that was definitely a major highlight of the whole trip for me. And the orange breasted buntings were just, icing on the cake, as well as this Pacific screech owl that was on a staked out roost there, and citrulline trogons, which I just learned the other day that's the only bird that uses that adjective in its name, citrulline, which is kind of cool. Ferruginous pygmy owls, and then even birding around the hotel. There's lots to see, even right in the city. So, like I said, you can walk to the beach, and along the way there are little parks and green spaces and just ornamental trees that create little micro habitats with things like these white-throated magpie jays, chachalacas, spot-breasted orioles, yellow Inca seeks. I spent like 20 minutes watching this troop of groove-billed anis working in an irrigation ditch just down the road. They're just so entertaining. Turquoise-crowned hummingbirds were feeding on flowering vines. And again, butterflies everywhere. This is an elf. In another view of the coast there, and we do some birding on the beach itself, particularly visiting the Copalito River mouth where it meets the Pacific. Depending on the season and the flow of the river, it kind of varies how you access it. It is an active estuary that creates this nutrient-rich zone. So with mudflats and brackish waters and vegetated waters, you get a lot of stuff that can be moving around in there. We had a good variety of shorebirds and wading birds and spoonbills and black skimmer and all sorts of things. But when we first got there, there was this common black hawk that was perched up hunting for something in the marsh there just behind the beach, as well as this Amazon kingfisher that was fishing from rocks right on the surf. And then on the beach itself, collared plovers scurrying around. And pretty much all the time, frigate birds flying around overhead. And we stopped at a lighthouse at one point that was up on a big bluff, and these frigate birds were actually flying below us, which was really cool to see. In those big rock columns that were there on the beach, we found some bats that were roosted up in one of the cracks of the rocks there, which was a cool surprise. And like I mentioned, one of the highlights of the whole trip is the food. It was just a treat the entire time on these things. When you're guiding trips and going on these things all the time, I try to be mindful about how much I'm consuming, but that went out the window on this one. From ceviche on the beach to handmade tortillas, it was just nonstop highlight after highlight after highlight. The moles were amazing. Just everything off the charts. But I mentioned Eric a couple times. This tour is spectacular because of Eric. I recently was birding with somebody on one of my other trips who had been on a trip with Eric, and they said, It was my first time to Mexico, and I would go anywhere in the world with Eric. And I completely agree with that sentiment. I feel totally at ease in his hands. Like I said, he knows everybody. Everywhere we go, he's shaking hands. Restaurants we go into, they know him. Just everybody knows Eric. I mean, he's a avid mountain biker, so they store his mountain bikes at the hotels in case he needs to go for a ride. Like, he has got the hookups. So as you can see, lots of smiling faces in the back there. This was just a spectacular trip. Those are just kind of the highlights. I didn't want to, drone on and on and on, but those were some of my favorite parts of the trip and kind of an introduction to what it's like. And before I get into questions, I just want to highlight some of my personal upcoming tours that I still have space for. Western Panama and Tranquilo Bay is coming up soon. Alaska Sampler in August. And then we get into the fall and winter with Yellowstone, Arizona, and New Mexico. Alaska Sampler, this will be my second time doing this. It's more of a relaxed pace trip, more about general wildlife, and as well as some great birding along the way. I think we have only a couple spaces left on that one. And then Yellowstone in the fall. I just wanted to mention this one. It's a little early. Still, we've got space on this one, but it's always slept on for some reason, and it's just spectacular. It's a less busy season to be in the parks. The trees are turning golden. The weather is beautiful. Some of the mammals are more active than they would be. There's great waterfowl. It's just an awesome trip if you've never been to that area before. And that's it. So thank you so much. These are some of our upcoming Oaxaca trips. If any of these dates look good to you, I think we have a couple different itineraries. Some of these itineraries go all the way to the coast, and then some of them, I think, stay closer to the city and are a little bit shorter. So depending on what you want to do, we've got options. And any questions? Oh, you're muted.
If anyone wants to pop questions down in the chat, again, we're happy to answer. Eric, did you want to just introduce yourself, and if there's anything you want to add at all?
Correct.
We'd love to. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, we'd love to hear.
I couldn't put it anything better than Bryan did. He's just so wonderful on how to describe the trip. But anyways, just so everybody knows, I'm Eric, and I had the pleasure of working with Bryan on this trip, and it was an absolute blast to spend time with him. Try to keep him off the food, but couldn't do it.
Good luck.
And then Robert, if you would like to introduce yourself, then Robert will be the guide on our April departure.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'll just very briefly, earlier in my career, I worked to establish a sister school relationship between schools in Montana with schools in Oaxaca. And so I visited Oaxaca many different times, both in Oaxaca City, but then also down along the coast near Puerto Escondido. It's one of my favorite places on earth. It's just a spectacular location. And I'm looking forward to going back. Eric, I look forward to meeting up with you.
Likewise, Robert. It would be such a pleasure to be out birding and working with you.
We have some questions about the differences in whether, or the birding throughout the seasons. I don't know if Eric, maybe you can speak to that a little bit about just the seasonal variety of, maybe our April versus fall, December, what might be different on those tours.
Right. It does change. For one thing, the main characteristic is the fact that closer to the fall and winter, we get a lot of North American species, even though the endemics and the residents are still around. But as the months progress and we get into the summer and spring, a bit of what the rainy season is, the number of migratory birds diminish, and some of the endemics become easier to see because they are out establishing territory or feeding young. So there's a fluctuation there of several things in the same way with butterflies. In the rainy months, or not rainy, but spring and summer, we get a bit of an increase on species of butterflies, and then on the fall and winter they kind of decrease. But the good thing about this trip is that, like Bryan mentioned, we go from 5,000 feet up to 10,000 feet and then down to sea level. So we cover all these little niches of habitat that can be very interesting, because there are a lot of micro habitats that sometimes you would end up having dry forest in the valley of Oaxaca, but then go up into 10,000 feet and suddenly it's all cloud forest. And so it changes, dramatically from one place to another. You could be out in the morning birding in pine forest, all cold and bundled up, and then you suddenly take a look at the view and you see the valley. It's all sunny and looks super warm. And by the time you go back to the city, you just don't realize the change of habitat. So it all varies depending on where you are, which side of the mountain you are, if you're facing a specific slope or are kind of like cover in the valley. So even though there are a bit of fluctuations in species, the habitats and elevations do make a great and interesting mix of species, plants, and insects.
We also have a question, or people were asking, Bryan, I believe it was the October departure that you did. Was that correct? Okay. Yes, but same itinerary as the April departure.
Correct.
Correct.
Let's see. Any other questions?
I think some people are asking whether the itinerary that Bryan did and will be happening in April, that's what we do, the long one, the one we do from Oaxaca City down to the coast. We have a shorter version which goes up to the mountains of the Sierra Sur. So we skip entirely the lowlands or the sea level stuff, but we still, on that short trip, we still go down a little bit into the cloud forest, into the Pacific slope, where we do the coffee area, the coffee finca, the tropical semi-deciduous forest there. So we have a little bit of a peak of the coastal stuff on that short trip, and then back again into the mountains, and eventually back into the city.
So the presentation you saw is the same itinerary as what will be happening in April. Just obviously a little different time of year, but largely similar.
Right.
Let's see. Someone's asking, how easy is it to get around in Oaxaca City if maybe you're not the most fluent Spanish speaker? Which I understand.
I'm not very fluent in in Spanish. It's actually not an issue. I mean, from what I've seen from customers, but maybe Bryan could answer this easier. Oaxaca tends to be a very friendly place, even for people that speak Spanish and are not from the city. Everybody's trying to point out into the direction of the restaurant you want to go, or back to the hotel you want to go. It's certainly a place that it's very friendly, and I don't think it's a problem at all. The fact that it's also a city that was laid over by the Spanish during the 16th century makes it a easy grade. You go pretty much very straightforward, few blocks north, few blocks south. It's kind of like a really easy layout from the city to get from point A to point B. It's not complicated. And again, because Oaxaca, it's so famous to tourists. Everybody's trying to help you and point out in the proper direction. But then again, maybe Brian could have a much better perception of what it would be to be in the city on its own.
Yeah, I would say I felt, like I said, I felt very comfortable to walk around and explore spaces, and I am not at all fluent in Spanish. Um, and like Eric said, they are very accustomed to tourists and Americans and people wanting to come and explore and buy stuff. And I mean, this you're not going to be the first one. They're used to it, and they're, like Eric said, extremely friendly. If the person you're trying to talk to doesn't speak any English or you're having a hard time communicating, there's going to be someone nearby who can help. I would recommend, at least learning a few key phrases to help yourself out, but it was very easy for me.
I always found Oaxaca City to be a very cosmopolitan place. There's people from all over the world coming, and so you may be sitting in a cafe in the Zocalo, and you'll hear 3 or 4 different languages that aren't rooted in the place, but are from all over the world. So it's a very friendly and welcoming place to visit.
Great. We also have a question about if we could expand a little on the boat trip that you do on the coast. If just kind of what kind of species you expect, how that usually goes.
Right. So on the pelagic, we do the pelagic when we do the long trip, the one that does reach down the coast. The continental shelf, because how dramatic the mountains go down the slope, the continental shelf, it's between 5 to 6 miles out from the shore, depending on where you take it. But it doesn't really take a long time to get into deep water. By an hour or so, you're already within 1,000 meters of depth in the ocean. And depending on the time of the year, again, it's either the California current kicking from the north or the Humboldt kicking from the south. We get a mix of species. So we get stuff like black-banded shearwaters, wedge-tailed shearwater, Galapagos shearwater coming, being pushed from the south. We also get a good number of Jaegers, boobies, depending again on the time of the year. We get Nazca boobies and storm petrels, black storm petrels, sleet storm petrels. And then we get some really interesting stuff when the water is shifting in the current. We have had stuff like Tahiti petrels, and on a pelagic like that, we also had Mexico's first streak shearwater. So it's being in the ocean, you can have a rather quiet day or a very busy day, but the sea never disappoints. We get pantropical spotted dolphins, olive ridley sea turtles, all sorts of cool stuff out in the ocean that definitely does not disappoint.
Great.
So I have a question, Brian. I didn't see you listing any trip again that you're doing Oaxaca for this year yourself. And I was with you at the Ohio Weekend Birding, and I enjoyed your leadership. So if I were to do a trip, I would want it to be at a time that you're going to be there. Do you have any upcoming trips in Oaxaca again?
So when Julie in the office, one of our company owners, asked me to do this Zoom, I said, yes, I will happily do this Zoom if you are going to send me back to Oaxaca. And so she said that she'll send me back for sure in 2027. So as long as we're on the same terms, I'll be back.
Okay.
TBD.
There's Julie.
We are on the same terms.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I need to wait for that if I'm going to do that. All right.
Coming soon.
To be considered. Thank you.
And I dropped a link in the chat, which I believe is to the hotspot for the pelagic offshore. Eric can correct me if I don't have the right hotspot, but for those who are asking about species that we might see there.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if there's any other questions, let us know. I know we talked a little about, a lot about how wonderful the food is on this one, which is a recurring thing that always we get in the feedback, the guides, everyone. I'm just curious if you guys want to maybe share a favorite dish or what you're what you're still thinking about, or Robert, what you're always excited to get when you go back, or Eric, what you're always excited to share with people.
I'll just say that Oaxaca is famous for moles. It's 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 sort of quintessential to eat mole when you're in Oaxaca, and it doesn't get any better.
Eric, what was the name of that restaurant where we ate upstairs that was so good?
Oh, that was Las Quinceletas.
That one. Oh,
Right.
that is what I dream of. And their trio of moles, so good.
Right. Yes, that's the one with the Michelin starred.
And then also we ate at one spot in Huatulco where the table was set up on the beach, like our feet was in the sand, and I had a great big bowl of delicious fresh ceviche, which was to die for. That was also a good memory.
I'm glad to hear that, sir. How was the ceviche? Some people are wondering where to stay if you want to go early. People have had the options of either finding a place near downtown, which is pretty good, pretty easy, because they are kind of like within the historical center. And so they are within walking distance to many of these cool places. There is also the chance and the opportunity to stay at the hotel where we stay, which is likely north of downtown Oaxaca. Both options work really well. Some of these hotels have a shuttle into downtown, and so it's pretty easy. Basically, whatever is more comfortable to people. Sometimes instead of trying to move from one hotel to another one to the beginning of the trip, some people decide to stay in the same hotel just for a longer stay prior to the actual trip. So there's all sort of options, from being in the same hotel or the ones in downtown Oaxaca. Like David just mentioned the Hotel de la Parra in downtown, which is pretty good too. Options are just plenty there.
And we do have on the website, on the tour page for the Oaxaca trips, there's a tab that says travel details, and there is a link to that hotel, to the recommended postmate hotel. So if of course, you're welcome to explore other options too, but we do have those options linked there on the website too. Well, that looks like maybe all the questions we have for now. Unless there's anything else that anyone wants to add, last minute additions. If anyone would like to book, you can go either send an email to travel@naturalistjourneys.com, or on our website, you can hit book your trip, which will be an option there too. And then just put the, tour dates of what you're interested in, and we'll get it either of those two ways, and we'll get right back to you. All right. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks, Bryan, Eric, and Robert, all for being here. And we'll hope to see all of you on a tour soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.